Hello and welcome to Q Simulator 2. No, wait, that's not right. This is Euro Truck Soliloquy, where I, Annemie, play some Euro Truck Simulator and talk about some stuff that's happened, I guess. I mean, firstly, I'd like to, not be in this queue. Maybe there should have been a nice keep clear sign in front here. That would be nice. Okay. Come on. So, I can't remember exactly where I finished up last time, but because I installed some of the location DLC, it decided to start me back at London. So, our current journey is to take some caviar from London to Mannheim. So that's exciting. It's always nice being able to provide goods and services for the common individual. Come on, let me through. I want to be through. I mean, at least this means we can be relatively sure that it's simulating London reasonably. Oh, come on, car. Let me get through here. I have no idea what's coming to my left. I can only hope that I'm safe. And I am! Yay! Okay. So, I'm sure we all know what's been happening this week. Loot boxes. So, I believe the state of the story last time we were here was that loot boxes had kind of blown up in EA's face. There were some gambling regulators that were starting to look at loot boxes, primarily in Belgium and the Netherlands, and oh my, the story has progressed since then. We now have a Belgian minister saying that he wants to take loot boxes to the EU for further regulation. We have Hawaii joining in on the action, and actually multiple other countries. We've got Australia, I believe the state of Victoria has started looking at loot boxes, but Hawaii's was the most amusing. Because not only did they call loot boxes what they are, which is predatory, they did so in Star Wars parlance, which is always appreciated, saying that about loot boxes that it's a trap. And yes it is. Well done, Hawaii representative. I don't exactly know what role he has. Yeah, State Representative Chris Lee. He said that it resembled a Star Wars casino, and that we didn't allow mascots to sell cigarettes to children, so why are we allowing Star Wars to sell gambling to children? This is not the lane I want to be on. I feel like motorways in this game are a bit more of a hassle than in real life, maybe? I never notice the actual... Well, I don't drive, so I probably wouldn't notice. But the lanes just turning off. I always thought that you had to actually turn onto the off-ramps. And that meant that you could stay in the nice slow lane and not have to worry too much. But no, in this game, I always head straight to the fast lane because then I know I won't accidentally go off the road. But no, EA had a response to Chris Lee, and they said that loot crates are not gambling, which is true, they are not legally gambling, but we'll get to that later. At least not in any jurisdictions that I'm aware of. And that loot crates, and so as to back up this feature, it seems, also said that loot crates were an optional feature. Now, this is technically true, in the same way that homes are an optional feature for living, that food is optional. I mean, you don't have to have food, you're not going to have a great time of it if you don't have food, but you can go without it. And it's this resorting to the legal definitions of things as if they are immutable that is somewhat frustrating. It's just like when gun rights advocates point to the Second Amendment of the United States and say, here, look, you can't take our guns away, you can't change this law, which is called an amendment. And you saw it in the British government's response to the whole loot crate thing, which was to say, yep, not legally gambling. Whereas the rest of us here are going, yeah, we know, we want to change that. We call it gambling because it is in the colloquial vernacular, it is conversationally gambling. You are putting up something which is of value for a chance to get other things of value. That's gambling. It doesn't matter if the objects in question have or are seen to have a real world value if they can be exchanged back into currency. That doesn't change how valuable it is to the individual. That individual obviously thought that these items were worth some amount of money. They were worth spending things on. And that's why they did it. It doesn't matter if you can also get the thing that you're gambling with in-game, because you can take that to ludicrous extremes, and you might be able to get one of these gambling chips, shall we say, every 24 hours that you are logged into the game. You can technically get that in-game, but you might be able to get way more by paying money. And that's not okay. And some interesting further news came out of the developers of Clicker Heroes 2. Now, if you don't know, Clicker Heroes is an idle game which, like so many of these idle games, you can click to get the currency yourself, or you can spend the money that you have gained by clicking in order to automate this clicking process, and you have all these various accoutrements around it. And I must confess, I do quite enjoy clicker games for what they are. Just seeing numbers go up is satisfying in a Skinner box way, but as long as I'm not spending money on it, because I don't think that these games on the whole are worth money to me. Other people might find they are, and if I'm not saying that no clicker game could be worth money for me, and in fact I'm actually kind of interested, because of the development of this story, which I'll get into in a minute. I'm very interested to see what Clicker Heroes 2 does. But for Clicker Heroes 2, they have... Oh, sorry, yes. Before I get onto that, I should also mention that Clicker Heroes does have microtransactions. It's a free game. It costs money to develop. So they want to recoup that money. And they do so by giving you the option to buy time-saving tools on their shop, buying premium currency at their shop. And for me, that's reasonable. It's the price of doing business, for getting enjoyment out of something for no cost, or at least no monetary cost. You've got to expect that they're going to try and recoup their losses, their sunk cost into making the game somehow. So yeah, sure. Offer me microtransactions. I'm probably not going to take you up on them. I don't think I've ever spent any money on a clicker game. But they are issuing this for the sequel, for Clicker Heroes 2. They are putting a price tag on it, so it is no longer going to be a free game, and they are not going to have any microtransactions. And the actual developers said something interesting about this for me. Let me navigate over to the right tab, because unfortunately My computer is being silly right now. What on earth? Why is the belt of incredible dexterity come up? This a Pathfinder item I was looking at yesterday, and for some reason it's still open in a tab. Well, professionalism. I should just open a new window for my Euro Truck Soliloquy stuff. That would be sensible, wouldn't it? But yes, one of the designers has said that in Clicker Heroes we never tried to abuse players with our real money shot. Despite this, we found that some number of players spent many thousands of dollars on rubies. Rubies being, I believe, I have played Clicker Heroes, but the idle games all tend to run together for me. But I think rubies are the premium currency that goes on in there, but you can pick them up from other sources as well. And this person goes on to say, I can only hope that these people could afford it and that they were doing it to support us, not to feed an addiction. But I strongly suspect this is not the case. And I find that a thoroughly laudable state of affairs. We have a tendency to mock people who spend vast amounts of money in games. If memory serves, I think there was a story a while back of this one individual that spent something like $15,000 on Mass Effect. I was like, sure, if you can afford it, if you are someone, I don't know, if you're Warren Buffett, sure, you can spend that amount on a video game and no one is going to be particularly worried. But the greatest probability is that this person wasn't as well off as Warren Buffett, and that this is a symptom of a problem. Or if it wasn't a symptom of a problem in this case, you can't reasonably believe that people's gambling addictions haven't been fed by some video games. I mean, they're designed to keep you enthralled. They want to keep you playing, and they want, some of them at least, want to have you pay them more for that privilege. And that just does feed into people's addictions. Okay, let's head over. But yeah, so these developers have said that they don't like that they make a living off other people's addiction. They're not going to take out the microtransactions in the original game because they're too, as they said, it would ruin the company, it would bankrupt the company. Particularly as people aren't going to like suddenly having to pay for what was free beforehand, which was, you know, the game. But we'll see how they do with Clicker Heroes 2. I think I did see a Steam listing for it, and it did seem to be about what you'd expect the price for a new game to be. I think it was at £29.99. I might be wrong on that, I might have misremembered, so don't quote me on that, but it was a decent whack of money, and I wouldn't feel comfortable paying that amount for an idle game. But if they cram enough features in there, I would be interested, because I like rewarding people who think about the ethics of their actions. The fact that whilst they might not be on street corners selling crack to addicted teenagers, they still have some effect on the ruination of some people's lives. But this whole debate is interesting for me, the microtransaction side, because France also started to chip in recently, and there was a statement from one of their ministers, which I'd like to read out to you. Stupid car. Once I actually get onto a piece of road where my eyes can wander without fear of me crashing into the reservation. So, there's a lot of winding going on here, but let's see if I can manage it. So, let's actually get this statement up, because again, when my browser decided to screw around a little bit, it also changed where my tabs were currently scrolled to, so that's fun. We'll peek behind the curtain. How far actually are we? Yeah, we're staying on this road for a while. Good. So, they said that video games are a positive trend in the world in general, and that of esports in particular, economically dynamic. This cultural industry seems to be a positive contribution to the country, far from the accusations of being an ultra-violent culture that was made only a few years ago. Which is true. We all remember the stories of people who committed mass shootings, and the media fixated on the fact that, yes, they'd played video games, oblivious of the fact that everyone of that age group, give or take, plays video games now. It's a method of entertainment for us. But they then go on to say, let's see, video games allowed millions of players to flourish, to exchange, and to develop a practice sometimes close to high-level sport. French game developers and the champions of the latest game on the esports scene contribute to French cultural influence on the world. I believe that the balanced and benevolent nature of the French online gambling regulator, which prefers to keep esport and gambling distinct from one another, has contributed to the general dynamism that can be observed today. So started off with that, and then went on to possibly what you'd expect from this statement. Today, loot boxes seem to require special attention from the public authorities, not police authorities. Many players and specialized observers, blah 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 blah. Question. Oh, whoops! Did that actually? No damage. Question the deleterious effects of the spread of these microtransactions in the world of video games. So we've already kind of talked about the second part of that, but the first part is what I find interesting, that there seem to be some sections of government which, or rather the sort of public sector, which are starting to appreciate that video games are not all bad. And this is important because this is something that's worrying me about the current debate. It's that people have a tendency to go too far. Right, by that I mean, firstly, don't send threats to people who work at EA. Don't do that. You're a twazzock, if you have done that. These people are most likely only following order. That was a rubbish German accent. I can't do a German accent. They were only following orders. No. Imagine that I said that they were only following orders in a hilarious German accent. But it's true. A lot of these developers don't want microtransactions in their games, because it does adversely affect the experience. These developers, they want people to get the maximum amount of enjoyment out of their work. They wouldn't be doing it if they didn't. People enjoying their work, even if we're just looking at it on a selfish level, people enjoying their work is how they still have a job in the future. So they want for most people to get the most fun out of their games, and microtransactions, particularly if a game is built up to make you want these microtransactions, they affect enjoyment. They want to make you think, hey, this game is pretty cool, but if I spent £5, it would be just that bit more amazing. Right, that's by design. There are some games which have microtransactions thrown in at the end, a la Deus Ex Mankind Divided, and those, the effects that they have are probably a bit more up for debate. Whilst playing Deus Ex Mankind Divided, I never felt the urge to buy anything, and I also didn't have to regularly go to a shop front to see all these things being advertised. I couldn't tell you at all what is being offered in the in-game shop. In Deus Ex Mankind Divided, it's that out of the way. So I think that if the microtransaction people and the game development people are entirely separate and never talk to each other, that might be acceptable, although if it is just going to be about giving players choice to do what they want, then just give the microtransactions away for free. Let the players decide how many extra praxis kits they're going to get, how much extra money they want for the game. I mean, typically this was controlled via cheat codes or something like that, where the players could, with a small amount of time investment, long enough to Google Age of Empires 2 cheat codes, they could figure out how to get in their medieval real-time strategy game a car that shoots guns. Right? If you wanted to change your gaming experience in that way, then it was free. It wasn't advised, it wasn't the experience that you were quote-unquote supposed to be having, but who says what experience you're supposed to be having? You don't see toy regulators saying you're playing with your Bratz dolls wrong. You have to enjoy them in this way, and if you want to enjoy them in any other way, then you have to pay us extra money in order to give yourself the choice to do something different. But, yeah. I got a bit sidetracked there. So yeah, no death threats, but also, and this is the thing which I'm a little bit more worried about, that's not to say that death threats aren't worrying, but at some point you just kind of assume that some parts of the internet are festering holes of racism and just generally vile behaviour. But the thing I'm more worried about is it's starting that panic again of video games being seen as things that turn children into killers. I think there's a certain age category, possibly those under 30 or 35 or something like that, who have grown up with video games, who are, as a generation, as familiar with video games as previous generations were to television. They don't view them as good, they don't view them as bad, they're just another form of entertainment. And that's that. But there are a lot of people who aren't in that camp. And I think we've got to be prepared to have the argument again of, no, video games cannot turn your child into a murderer. Yes, I know that Manhunt existed and Hatred and all these other ultra-violent games, but they are not training your kids to become killers. And that has a real risk of derailing this argument, that and the death threats, as it happens. I mean, the same thing happened with Gamergate, right? I was not on the side of people who thought that there was a real problem with ethics in games journalism, and that Anita Sarkeesian and Zoe Quinn were the worst examples, most heinous examples of corruption within video. I'm not on that side, but the fact that those people and many more did receive death threats did derail the argument and made the people who were ostensibly concerned about ethics in games journalism, even though, in my humble opinion, they were somewhat misguided, it did paint them all with the same brush that you are violent misogynists. And as we've talked about before, there are a lot of misogynists within the video game community, and we need to do something about that. We need to not let them hijack every discussion that we want to have about bettering our community. We can't let them be the loudest voices. But yeah, let's just be vigilant. Let's make sure to keep the conversation on loot boxes, and let's be civil. I'm on a mission to civilize. Okay, so how are we doing on this journey? Still a decent way to go, about 5.5 in-game hours. But so, another big story this week. Bungie and Destiny 2, which ties actually quite nicely into the microtransaction thing, because Destiny 2 is full of them. Again, full disclosure, not played Destiny or Destiny 2. I don't tend to enjoy your competitive online shooters that much, so tend to stay away from them, but if you enjoy them, more power to you. So, Destiny 2 has has a level cap to start with, and after you've reached that level cap, you can still keep filling your experience bar, and you can keep leveling up in order to get loot boxes, essentially. You can use them to get rewards in-game. Now, Bungie have made it so that, and this wasn't a known fact to the people playing the game, it wasn't announced, that events which are easily grindable in the game to give you experience will give you significantly diminishing returns if you do lots of them at a time, whereas the ones that are harder to grind won't. And of course, you can always purchase the rewards you get from leveling up with real-world money. Come to our shop. And if I were cynical, I would say that it's because they want gamers to pay money in order to give the developers and publishers another gold-lined swimming pool. But that's only if I was cynical, and as you well know, I am no such thing. For Bungie is an honourable developer, and they have they've released a statement saying, after this was revealed, by the way, by people who weren't Bungie, they've released a statement saying, hey, look, this isn't me quoting because I don't like smashing into the walls. Oh, actually, I could read it, and it's right there on my screen. It's almost as if I'm prepared. We've seen community discussion around XP gain in Destiny. Let me just get around here. Again, that's not in the statement. After reviewing our data, we agreed that the system is not performing the way we'd like it to. Today, we'd like to describe what's going on under the hood, and talk about what you can expect going forward when it comes to seeing XP in Destiny 2. Now that would have been laudable if they'd not been caught doing it. Right, that's not them saying... Okay, it might very well be true that they were going to announce that they were changing things anyway. That might be true, but the timing seems suspect. It seems way more likely that this is some effort to do the public relations thing, to save face, and make some gamers think, hey, yeah, Bungie agrees with us. Bungie are cool, let's give more money to Bungie. No, that's not how it is. There are very few companies who say, hey, look at all the money we're getting, let's try and make less. Unless you're developing Clicker Heroes 2, of course. But firstly, I don't think there would have necessarily been a problem had this been... Oh, did I go the wrong way? I think I did. Am I going to Metz? I didn't think I was going to Mannheim. I just noticed my GPS rerouting, so I was confused. But let's have a look at the world map. Yeah, I do need to turn around. Whoops. Well, that's all part of the fun of not really paying attention to the game I'm playing. So yeah, if Bungie had said in advance, look, these events are easily grindable, that means we're not going to give you as much experience for keeping doing them, there would still have been some concern, if only for the fact that you're making it harder for people to get rewards for free that they can also pay for does look suspect. Right? It just does. Right, can I turn around here? Well, I'm guessing I'm not supposed to, but... I am the law! And the law is not mocked. Well, there we go. Flawless! It will always look suspicious, but games have been adding experience modifiers for quite some time now, and it would have probably blown over, particularly in the shadow of other more egregious examples of trying to bilk players for cash. Bilk, I should have just said milk. I don't really know what the word bilk means. It's like brown milk. Ooh, that's just chocolate milk. So yeah, it's not been a good week for microtransactions, is I think what I'm trying to say. Okay. So this next story is one from actually a little while back that I didn't know to the time. It's not from that far back, and it's not a story about a thing that's actually happened yet, but a thing that's going to happen, and that's Assassin's Creed Origins is going to add an educational mode next year, I believe. I think it's planned for January, and it's called Discovery Mode, where essentially you're going to treat, or the open world of Assassin's Creed Origins is going to be treated like a museum. So most of you won't be aware of this, but I'm sure there are fairly similar things at other museums. There's the Jorvik Museum in York, which is a museum about essentially Viking life in York, which at the time was called Jorvik, hence the name, and it's got this whole walk-through, ride-throughable section where it tries to emulate Viking life. It's particularly good for kids to get an idea of how things actually were to the best of our knowledge. And we're not able to give perfect information because new discoveries get made all the time. But it would seem to be like that sort of thing, but accessible on a much larger scale. So Ubisoft say that they're working with historians to try and make these sorts of things as accurate as possible, and it's going to... So one of the things I believe they're going to look at is mummification. So you might have a little virtual mummification tour around Egypt with a narrator talking you through things, and this really seems to be the right way for educational games to go. I remember when I was younger, about sort of 10 or 11, there was this sort of educational game which my grandma had on her computer, which I used to play a decent amount because I used to like doing sort of maths puzzles, and some of them were sort of dexterity puzzles where you'd have to drop a thing into a thing in-game. Right, I'm so descriptive right now. But it's very basic gameplay-wise. And particularly once you gain maybe a more refined understanding of video games, or alternatively when you're not at your nans with very little else to do, those games start being less appealing. And I've learned far more about history from Assassin's Creed and from Civilization, and even from the Total War series and things like that. I've learned far more about the world from... Oh, and Crusader Kings. Can't forget Crusader Kings 2. Than I have from quote-unquote educational games. Because they make you want to immerse yourself in the world. If you see something interesting in a game, you're much more likely to want to Google it afterwards and find it on Wikipedia or whatever, and be like, hey, this is really interesting, I'm going to remember this, than if you're just told that information and are tested on it. Right? Because of Assassin's Creed Black Flag, I now have a decent idea about what the rough dates of the golden age of piracy are. I know... Let's get some lights on here. Roughly when Blackbeard was a thing. Come on, there we go. Nope, a little bit further forward. Stupid box. But I really look forward to when games start entering the classroom, not just as those really sort of trite games that teachers try to use to convince you that, look, education is fun, but the ones that actually make you engage with the periods. I mean, it's never going to be the entirety of education, and I think that anybody who would suggest that is somewhat misguided. But seeing them be a part of education is no bad thing. I mean, board games have been doing this for a little while now. There are a couple of games in my collection which really do try to educate you. The first one we've got is Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. It's a really good detective murder mystery type game, which... Ooh. Yeah, this way. There we go. This way. There. Yep. So it's a really good game. It's got 10 cases in it. 6 of them in the version that we've got just fictional stories where you have to figure out murderer and see what sorts of events have been happening around the city of London. And 4 of them are a little mini campaign based on Jack the Ripper. And I never really knew that much about Jack the Ripper. I knew the whole throat thing. I learned a little bit from Assassin's Creed Syndicate, as it happens. But now, because I'm having to investigate the murders, at least within... oh, to the right. At least within the fiction of a game, and I'm spending... right, there are 4 campaigns. There are 4 sort of cases in this campaign. They might each take sort of 2.5 hours. So up to about 10 hours looking at real facts from the Jack the Ripper campaign, learning about various people involved with Jack the Ripper who might be suspected of being the Ripper. It's taught me way more than even... I'm fairly sure that I must have read some bits about Jack the Ripper before in, say, some of the horrible history books, which are also really good. But now I can actually quote some facts about the game, because not only do they have you investigating these clues, there are obviously some fictionalized elements going in there because we don't know everything that happened. But they also give historical notes at the end. And a very similar thing happened with a game, just a lesser known game than Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, called A Few Acres of Snow. And this is a game which is set in Canada and North USA during the 7 Years' War. And it taught me, as well as I'm sure many other people who aren't from that area, that there actually was a war going on. There, a hot war. Essentially a dummy war between the French and the British. Those are the 2 sides you'll be controlling during this game. And it also, in the game, has, I think, about 4 pages of historical notes, which I have read. I've forgotten most of what's going on in there, but it prompted me to read more about this than I ordinarily would have, and I'll probably go back at some point and read it again, because it's well written and it ties in with the mechanics of the game. And even the name is educational, because it turns out that that is, upon losing Canada, what Voltaire remarked to, I assume it was Napoleon at the time, that all he's lost are a few acres of snow. Because Canada, you're worth a lot. You have Justin Trudeau, I mean, come on. And of course, as I mentioned before, Civ as being one of those educational games. I wouldn't... Without Civilization, I would never have known what the Alhambra was. I wouldn't have really known the first people's name for Ayers Rock, which is Uluru, without Civ. The Mahabodhi Palace, just loads of wonders and leaders of civilizations that aren't Western European. Right? I know about Napoleon, I know Julius Caesar, I know Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth, Winston Churchill, even, the occasional African leader like Cleopatra, Ramesses, but wouldn't have heard of Haile Selassie without Civ. And that's got to be a good thing. And we need more games to do it. But anyway, we're approaching our destination. We're a little bit under time, but I'm loath to start another contract, and I'm mostly exhausted. What I want to talk about, maybe I'll hold net neutrality over for next week. But yeah, it's an interesting time for games at the moment, and I think it's one of the few times outside of possibly the trying to get video games in 18... Ooh. Not on the motorway anymore, Annemie. Outside of trying to get an 18 rating for games, that I've seen the actual game community on the side of the legislators. Or parts of the game community on the side of the legislators. And it's occasionally nice to see that people do agree with us. Yay! Leveled up. Right, let's get some more long distance stuff. Good. So yes, thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please do like it and subscribe to my channel. That way I'll be able to produce, you know, more of these videos. And I'm going off to repair my truck, and I hope that you guys have a lovely rest of your day wherever you are. Goodbye!